Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a breaking edition of the Locked On Predators podcast. We're your Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and boy, do we have a doozy of a breaking news item for you this afternoon. John Hynes, it's finally happened, folks, is out as Nashville Predators head coach, according to Kevin Weeks, and in comes Andrew Brunette, assistant coach with the New Jersey Devils, Jack Adams nominee last year as interim coach of the Florida Panthers, and member of the Nashville Predators inaugural team way back during the 1998-1999 season. A lot to unpack here. First off, boy, this kind of seemed like the foregone conclusion that Hynes was not going to be back as Nashville Predators head coach. It started becoming just more and more clear throughout the offseason. Never really got that big vote of confidence from Barry Trotz, other than just, some praise for the work he did down the stretch. You heard 3-4 weeks into the offseason when, Barry Trotz talked with, Chase McCabe on 102.9 The Game, or 102.5 The Game, I should say. He had that quote where he was just extremely non-committal to John Hynes, wouldn't comment on his future, just kind of offered in that same praise he offered during the offseason, but made it clear the valuation was still going on. And then over the weekend, we heard that the Predators were kicking the tires around, talking to some other coaching candidates. And it just seemed like at that point, John Hynes' days were numbered. I think what the Nashville Predators did was what they did when they fired Peter Laviolette back in 2020. It's that same kind of vibe. When John Hynes came in, Laviolette got fired. They had the press conference the very next day. John Hynes comes in, is named the new head coach. The Predators had their replacement signed, sealed, and delivered before they made the move about the coaching switch. And that seems like what this situation was. The Predators were only going to move on from John Hynes if they were 100% sure they could lock in their guy, their candidate that they absolutely thought that they could, do a better job than John Hynes. And that seems like what they got in Andrew Brunette. They weren't going to make that move, without Andrew Brunette on the dotted line or, whatever other candidate they were looking at. So it just kind of felt like this was a situation where if John Hynes was back, it wasn't exactly going to be the Predators' plan A, that he was just kind of the last resort and he was going to get another chance if the Predators couldn't find anybody better. How do we look at the John Hynes era in Nashville? This is a little bit complicated because, as we mentioned many times before, there are a lot of people unhappy with this hire from day one. And I think the fact that a lot of people aren't a fan of John Hynes kind of clouds some of the stuff he did do in Nashville. There's a lot of people who are going to tell you that he's the worst coach the Predators have ever had. Of the three the Predators have had, he's certainly been the least successful. So, that's one thing in mind. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to John Hynes was maybe the right guy for where the Nashville Predators thought they were as an organization, and not necessarily the best option for where they in reality were going as a franchise. John Hynes, when he came over from New Jersey, a lot of people sung the praise of him getting the best out of some of his players, helping players unlock that new step. You heard Taylor Hall after he won the Hart Trophy under John Hynes, talk about how John Hynes, kind of helped him refine his game, fine tune some things, helped him, kind of elevate himself to be a better player that wound up winning the MVP that year. You saw John Hynes do that with a lot of players in Nashville. You had Roman Josi absolutely shatter some team records. You had Matt Duchene coming off one of the worst seasons of his career, wind up stepping up and breaking a team record, most goals in the season. Philip Forsberg took his game to the next level. Ryan Johansson found some magic. Mikael Granlund, after a couple of terrible years under Peter Laviolette, reinvented his game and became a good fit in Music City. But in reality, the Predators needed more than that. They needed to develop younger players. They needed to get that next generation of speed and skill ready to go. They needed to kind of find a new way of thinking things, maybe beyond just the, old school Preds defense first, throw grit out there, different guys to play in different situations. They needed to kind of adjust their way of thinking towards the new NHL that a lot of these successful teams are taking advantage of. And that wasn't John Hynes' strong suit. It just felt like John Hynes could never really adapt, maybe is the best word. Couldn't really think of a new way to, utilize some talented players that were on his bench, very much like, well, here's Ellie Tolvanen on the bench who can score and is very fast and, has a lot of skill, but he can't kill penalties. And, we already have our, first power play unit booked up. So he's on the bench and we're going to play Cole Smith because he kills penalties. It's very much, I think, in the NHL, especially nowadays, you have to find the best 12 forwards on your team, 18 skaters, however you want to look at it. You have to find the best people on your team and figure out a way to use them that, you do have different situations covered. Maybe there's, a top line guy who's good at defense that maybe you need to help on the penalty kill. We've seen Florida do that this year to good success. I mean, look at Sasha Barkov, really good two-way player. The Boston Bruins have been doing it with years. I mean, their number one center, Patrice Bergeron, is their number one penalty killer. And it just kind of seemed like John Hynes was stuck in this player, his role is going to be on the penalty kill. This player, his role is going to be in this situation on the power play. We're only going to give this player offensive zone starts, not really adapting to, finding new ways to do things. And I think that at the end of the day was John Hynes' downfall. That, and, I just think that he didn't really give players like, Ellie Tolvanen a chance to grow. I really disagree with kind of how he handled Cody Glass at the beginning of the season, although I know Ann Kimmel's going to disagree with that. But this sort of, oh, well, you made a mistake, so I'm going to pull you from the game to kind of recenter your thoughts. I really did not like that strategy from John Hynes. And I know some people will disagree with me, but, at the Nashville Predators, where they are right now, you need your young players to grow. And you might be in a situation where you're just going to have to put all of your prospects out there and say, screw it. There's going to be some growing pains, but we need to see what we have. That might be where the Nashville Predators are. And I'm not sure John Hynes is best equipped to be that coach. Plus, let's be honest, if he was back, he would have had an extremely short leash next season. Let's look at the other side of this. Andrew Brunette, coming in from the New Jersey Devils as his assistant coach there. Of course, everybody knows him from his time in Florida last year, took over the interim head coaching role after Joel Quenneville was, kind of forcibly put out by the NHL. Winds up leading the Panthers to the President's Trophy, nominated for the Jack Adams. Surprisingly not brought back as head coach or named head coach. They went out and got Paul Maurice, which at the time surprised a lot of people. Right now, it kind of looks like the right call. But that will put, Andrew Brunette out in New Jersey instead. And of course, we know what happened there. He takes over for Lindy Ruff as an assistant coach under Ruff. He is, helps guys like Jack Hughes and some of these other players find the best years of their career. And all of a sudden, New Jersey is this hot up and coming young powerhouse with a lot of young star people. And I think there's, Andrew Brunette certainly got a lot of credit for what's going on up there. And I think that is kind of the allure of bringing him back to Music City, because you look at guys like, Cody Glass, who's already in the NHL. You got guys like Phil Tomasino, Luke Evangelista, Joakim Kamel waiting in the wings. And I think it's just the allure of having all of these young forwards And as Barry Trotz mentioned, they need to find that surefire number one center, that surefire, kind of elite scorer at the top of the lineup, something that's eluded the Predators for, years. And Andrew Brunette that's kind of his reputation, is developing those star forwards and helping young guys kind of find that next gear. That, I think, is probably the big hockey fit that the Nashville Predators saw in him. He is good at adapting, kind of, we saw it in Florida last year, the way he utilized some of his star players and some of his younger players, kind of a different way of thinking, not afraid to kind of, shuffle the deck, do some things different. That, I think, is another big thing. I think the Predators need to kind of reinvent themselves a little bit. And that is another big allure. And we also have just this sort of hometown feel, don't we? It was like when Barry Trotz came back to take over as GM, you have somebody from that inaugural Nashville Predators team, a very popular member of that Nashville Predators inaugural team, coming back to Nashville to kind of lead the helm. And all of a sudden, you sort of feel it was like when Trotz came back. It was just sort of like a full circle, refresh, excitement, that sort of storyline where, you have a guy who's been a member of this team coming back and helping the Predators kind of get out of this, pit of mediocrity they are now. I like that. I like the fact that the Nashville Predators are prioritizing, former players. I've already seen some talk about, hey, maybe Joel Bouchard, who's a very good AHL coach, wants to come over and be an assistant in the NHL level now. Wouldn't hate that. I think it's fun for the players. Nashville, those of us who grew up here, we definitely know we'd like to prioritize our hometown kids. We like our local feel. And, so the fact that we have a couple of former Predators now running the helm, it feels a little bit more special, doesn't it? It feels more like, we're behind them. We're going to have patience. And I think that's the big thing too, is this Predators' next step in the franchise is going to need some patience. At the end of the day, it's just, I think from a fan perspective too, like what happens if you bring back John Hynes? It's just a powder keg waiting to explode. And I think that's the other thing, is you need to kind of have a full reset for the team, for the fan base, for the city, for the organization, and bringing in a new head coach, I think certainly does that. I think it would have been equally as unfair to John Hynes to put him in that situation next year where you're just waiting for the first sign of trouble as an excuse to cut him loose, rather than just saying, you know what, we need to start fresh. We need to start with some guys, and the writing was on the wall for John Hynes anyway. I think it's a smart move for the Nashville Predators just to go full reset, give the Predators fans some optimism next year, give your team space to breathe, and now you can really focus, if you're Barry Trotz, on building this team how you want to, have them play the style you want to, and maybe reinvent yourself as a franchise. There is so much more to get into this, and we are going to do that, I'm sure, several times this week. Ann and I will be doing a full recording tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning on the Locked On Predators podcast, so stay tuned for that. As, of course, there's probably also going to be some kind of press conference to kind of explain what went down, hear from Andrew Brunette, all that good stuff. So we look forward to that. So stay tuned with us. We will be here every step of the way. In the meantime, you can follow us on Twitter at LO_Predators. You can find my story on John Hynes at Penalty Box Radio, and follow me at _NS Morgan on Twitter as well. That's going to do it for us quickly on this breaking edition of the Locked On Predators podcast. Again, we will have a lot more on this coming up later this week, so stay tuned. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day, and we will have more on this breaking story as it develops.